Hi, everyone. We're just sort of waiting for people to trickle in and get things started. I feel weird. Like, I know I don't need to have the YouTube video of this up, but now I'm like, oh, I feel like naked without it.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So I'm just gonna pull that up.
Yeah, I just did the same.
I was thinking when I was writing out questions for this live show, oh, this is probably going to be pretty short. And then I just kept writing questions and I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Especially because it's two stories. I mean, they're short, but that's two different things to talk about.
Yeah, I thought I made it easy on us because I'm like, well, it's a tiny little novel and a silly little short story.
The works are short, but our thoughts are long, as always.
That should be one of our other slogans.
Okay. Oh. Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Yay, we have friends.
Yay. Oh, I have notifications on YouTube. I don't sign into my YouTube channel anymore because I just haven't been posting videos. And so sometimes I'm like, wait, I still get notifications from people?
See, when I watch BookTube, I'm always on my BookTube account. So I sign in even when I'm being a bad BookTuber.
You guys have had a lot going on though.
Right now.
I'm always excited when we get content from you, but it's not you guys have a lot happening. I mean, everybody does, honestly.
Yes, truth.
Yeah. So I guess we can go ahead and get started with the introductions. So hi everyone. For those of you who don't know, we are going to be talking about two Sherlock Holmes. I'm going to say books throughout this live show, and one is a novel and one is a short story. But the novel is A Study in Scarlet, and the short story is A Scandal in Bohemia. And before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick content warning for anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Mormonism, misogyny, and murder. Lots of M's here. And with that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? So what I have is, who are you and what is your channel about? And Cara, you have inspired me. So if you could tell me what's a great movie you've watched recently, that would be great.
That's a good one. This is going to expose how few movies I watch.
Yeah. Let me open Letterboxd real quick. Oh my gosh, I know what I'm going to say. Anyways.
Do you want to go first? Because I'll need a minute.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I'm Julia. My channel is virtually non-existent other than this book club at the moment. However, I'm excited to return in the new year with videos, right? I can do that. I mean, I already told Cara this, but I have filmed my least favorite books of 2021. So, eventually that'll be edited and it's fine. I read a lot of historical fiction specifically recently, and it's also just my favorite genre. So a lot of historical adjacent things. So classics and historical romance and, and historical mysteries and all historical right now, apparently. Historical fantasy, it's just, it is what it is. So if you want some things like that, follow me. Because I talk about it everywhere frequently and on YouTube sometimes. And then my movie recommendation. Some people who are here have already heard me talk about this, and I watched Fried Green Tomatoes for the first time. It destroyed me. When I tell you, I think I cried for 2 hours straight through the whole movie. It was 15 minutes in, and I cried. And then I continued to cry for the rest of the movie because sad things were happening. And they reminded me of the first sad thing that that had happened. And so if you need some a cathartic good cry, Tomatoes. And it has sapphic representation, even though I think in the movie they try to frame it as friendship. But I guess in the book it's very obviously these are lesbians. So yeah. Anyways, that was on for way too long. Cara, talk about
Not at all.
No, that's fine. Hi everyone. So my name is Cara. My channel is Wilde Book Garden, and I read very widely. That's something that's really important to me, and that I also just genuinely enjoy. I tend to say my go-to genres are fantasy and historical fiction, but I do read pretty much everything. Like I'm reading a lot of contemporary, a lot of nonfiction. Occasionally, like sprinkle in some things like sci-fi and romance. So I read a lot. I also read really widely across age ranges. I usually end up talking about middle grade and young adult. I do read adult, but I don't talk about it as much because I don't need help. Honestly, like the prestige level is not as low, I feel like. So I don't ever mention it, but I do read adult books if you are wondering. And yeah, so mine is not exactly a movie, but it is filmed and you can watch it. So I'm counting it. But I just recently rewatched because like I tend to rewatch things more than watch things. It's a problem. But I recently rewatched She Loves Me again, which if you do the free trial for Broadway HD, you can watch any of their stuff, which I highly recommend. They have several things on there that I really love. And She Loves Me is just one of my really like go-to like cozy things. Like I really love it. It has Zachary Levi and Laura Benanti in it, who are amazing. It has Jane Krasinski, I think I always mix her up with another actress's name, but I know who she is. She does an amazing job in that one. Just like the whole cast in general, and the music is great. It's a take on I think it's a better version of You've Got Mail, honestly. It's like based on the source material for that. So it's set in like a perfume and beauty shop instead of like bookstores. And I find the ending much more satisfying in this show. And it just like really makes me happy. I think the music is good. The performances are great. It's one of those where like, I can't explain why it was like, oh, this is one of my favorite things, instead of like, this was a nice time. I enjoyed this. Like, I cannot explain why I love it so much, but I do. So I highly recommend that.
And to piggyback off of what you said, Cara, if you're someone like me who doesn't love the hate to love trope, this is like a really good,
it's a really good
version of it.
Yes, it's a really, really good version of that. Thank you, Julia. I agree. I think even if that's not necessarily your thing, you could really enjoy this one because I like the way that they do it.
You had me at the cast, and also just mentioning that it's a better version of You've Got Mail, because that movie was so disappointing.
I am so upset about that movie. Like, I'm bitter about it.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor, and if I were to post videos, I would post videos about all genres because that's what I tend to read across, but mostly romance and classics and the occasional sci-fi and fantasy. I read mostly adult literature now, but I do like the good YA contemporary or middle grade fantasy. And as for a great movie I've watched recently, last night I watched, and this is a horror movie, so I don't know if this is this audience's cup of tea, but I watched The Thing. And yeah, because we were in the middle of a nor'easter, and my roommate was like, what if we watch The Thing because it takes place in Antarctica? And I was like, okay.
Wait, is this like an old movie or like a newer movie?
It came out in 1982. It's like by John Carpenter, the guy who did the Halloween movies.
Oh my gosh. What?
Yeah.
Is it spoilers if I ask what The Thing is? Like, what is The Thing? The titular thing?
Literally, it really is just a thing. There is no way to describe it other than that it can take the form of anyone. But when you see The Thing, it literally, you can only describe it as a thing.
Would you compare it to, have you seen the X-Men movies?
That's what I was picturing.
There's not Mystique. I'm not talking about Mystique. I'm thinking about the one senator guy who like becomes like gelatinous. That's what I'm picturing.
No, think of the grossest thing you can imagine and multiply it by 6.
Ew. Okay. Well, sounds like a time though.
But Kurt Russell's in it and he's looking really cute.
Listen, I love me a young Kurt Russell. Not gonna lie.
It's good. But kind of scary. So, moving into Sherlock Holmes, I feel like it's really hard to sort of say like, oh, what's your experience with Sherlock Holmes? Because it's so ubiquitous and it's so ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist that I think it's almost impossible for someone who lives in the United States to not know who Sherlock Holmes is. But I do want to ask you too, have you read any of the Sherlock Holmes books, read any adaptations, or seen any film or TV versions, whether it's like a one-to-one adaptation or derivative of Sherlock Holmes? And if so, which one is your favorite?
Do you want me to go first, Julia?
Yeah, I was going to let you take the floor, Cara.
Okay. So this is the first time I've like officially read full stories from Sherlock Holmes, or of Sherlock Holmes. And I actually read the first half of A Study in Scarlet like years ago. And then I thought it was over. So I stopped and I was feeling real dumb about that until I read the story this time. And I'm like,
of course I thought it was over.
Yeah, like that is a reasonable assumption to make. So I'm feeling better about that. And I did not realize until you asked me this, but I have actually seen a lot more adaptations than I thought I had. I have seen, I don't know what season they're on, the BBC Sherlock. I ended up getting really mad with that show and like quitting in a huff, which I have some thoughts about the Irene Adler episode as well. But yeah, so I've seen that. I've seen some of Elementary, which I really enjoyed. I think I've seen both Robert Downey Jr. movies, which I actually really enjoyed. Yeah, which I actually really liked those as well. Also, Jude Law is like the only actor I've ever seen who looks good in that facial hair. I like Jude Law. And then I've also seen, I think, a couple of the older ones that had Basil Rathbone in them. I think I've seen one or two of those. As for my favorite adaptation, maybe Elementary, although I don't know if that would still be true based on some things that I know happen in later seasons. But I did really like that one. Probably most surprising that I enjoyed would be the Robert Downey Jr. ones. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about them, but I actually think they did a good job. I had fun.
Nice.
Yeah. I can't remember if there was another part to that question.
No, I mean, it was a many-part question because I was writing Stream of Consciousness.
I love it. I am much less experienced in Sherlock Holmes lore. In college, I had to read a book. I don't think this counts. It was about Arthur Conan Doyle. Like, it wasn't Sherlock, but it was a fictional book about the author. So that is one thing. And then I have seen The Hounds. What's The Hound? The Basque or whatever. Because my friend was in a play version of it, so I like knew that a little. And then girlies in the chat, you want to say it for me? Enola Holmes. That's my favorite.
That's right. I saw that as
my
well.
husband in it. And yeah, and it really kind of ruined regular Sherlock Holmes for me. Oh, and Cara, we've both read A Study in Charlotte.
Yeah, I feel like I disappointed.
The Sherlock series.
Yeah.
So really, the only Sherlock adaptations I've ever seen are ones that go, "Ew, Sherlock Holmes. No, we're gonna make this about a girl." So that's the only Sherlock I know.
Which is very on brand, Julia.
Yeah.
Oh no, not him. A girl.
And Julia, Nana does have a question for you. Do you have a fun fact of the actor of from Elementary?
I feel like Nana, I feel like you've said this before and I've forgotten what it is. He used to be married to Angelina Jolie. Is that it? Am I right? Do I win a prize?
I think I might know what Nana's talking about. Is it that the guy who played Sherlock Holmes was in the BBC adaptation of Emma as Mr. Knightley?
I know.
I love him for it.
That's what I think of Johnny Lee Miller as being from, is like Jane Austen.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah. He was also in Mansfield Park, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was in that terrible adaptation of Mansfield Park that just girl bossified Fanny Price.
They're all bad adaptations, but I think that, I mean, I haven't seen the whole version of the other one, so I shouldn't say that. But yeah, it's bad. They're like, what if we took Fanny Price and didn't? Like,
listen, I love that movie despite how bad it is. Don't besmirch its name.
It's not the Billy Piper one.
No, I know. I like the bad one.
Okay.
I like the 1999 one.
Okay.
That's my favorite. I love it. It's bad. I like it a lot.
I think I would like it more if I didn't like read a Wikipedia article about Mansfield Park related to Fanny Price and then saw the girl bossified version. And then when I read the book, I thought like anti-slavery was going to be more of an element. And then I read it and they were like, slavery sucks. And then moved on.
It's really in like one scene. It's
Yeah.
not as big as everyone makes it sound.
I will like acknowledge that adapting Mansfield Park is a really difficult job, especially the character of Fanny, because what makes her such an engaging character is all her like internal stuff, and it's really hard to do that in a movie. So like they're torn. They're like, we need to make every Austen lead basically Lizzie Bennet, but then it's like not really a Mansfield Park adaptation anymore. Like they kind of like combined Fanny with like Jane Austen, like the fact that she wanted to be an author, like Fanny would never. She would
like when they break the fourth wall.
Yeah, there were some
that.
choices made.
Anyways, I was right though.
We always end up talking about Jane Austen.
I know. You say that like it's a problem.
I know. I love it.
For our club, which is ironic.
So as for me, I have read 2 Sherlock Holmes short stories before. I figured I should have looked them up before the live show, but I don't remember what they are, except that one was racist. You know, brown people just love being servants. It's like our calling in life, and we are just so loyal to the people we serve.
Ew.
But I have also read A Study in Charlotte, which I don't remember much of other than that the sorority I was in college was mentioned because a girl from that sorority got murdered.
Oh my God.
And I have seen some, like the first 2 seasons of Elementary, which I think is my favorite version of Sherlock Holmes. I just think it's a lot of fun. I love that Watson is a woman, and I love that she's Lucy Liu.
She's so good. Yeah.
Honestly, let's get Lucy Liu as Sherlock Holmes too. I love that.
I'm down. Then I'll watch it.
And I've also seen Enola Holmes, which I like some elements of it, didn't like others, but you know what I loved? Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes.
Exactly.
I was
Mr. Henry.
like, wow.
Wow, Sherlock, you're so muscular. Wow.
You're so funny. How tall are you? And I've seen the second Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes thing. And I'm sure I've seen other versions because Sherlock Holmes is, like I said, ubiquitous, but that's what I can remember off the top of my head. So I want to move on to our first topic of discussion, which is A Study in Scarlet. So what are your initial thoughts and ratings?
I forget whose turn it is to go first.
I think yours, Julia.
Okay. I gave it 3 stars. Listen, I think there are some merits. There are some things that I found interesting, but the pacing is truly god awful. Like Cara said, I got to the end of the first part, and then I had to go to Wikipedia and be like, hey, is the story still going, or is this a second short story that they included in this audiobook? Because we jumped to Utah and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So like that is wild to me. And I know we're going to get into characters later. But I think it's a really like lazy and cheap choice to make Watson our narrator so that you can save all the brilliance of Holmes's mind for this big reveal at the end, when it's like, or he could like be a detective and like tell Watson these things as he's noticing them so we can put the puzzle pieces together too, instead of just being like, oh, and here's my grand reveal. I knew it all along. I'm like, then you should have said something sooner, Sherlock. Like, I got my beef with Sherlock. I know we're going to
Except they do like talk about the fact that he does that. Like that is an annoying thing he does. I don't think it's
but he points out like random things and then like 2 of them end up having to do with the murder. The rest of it is like, oh, Watson, I noticed you got wet recently. And it's like, what? What are you talking about?
Show off. Yeah.
He's just annoying. I don't like Sherlock. I'm so sorry. This is the wrong live show. I should not be here. But I gave it 3 stars. I think the Lucy and whatever her adopted dad's name is, loved them. I loved the Cosette and Jean Valjean vibes that they were giving. I would have read a book just about them.
Cara?
I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars. I liked the first half substantially more. I am a Sherlock fan, like as far as like characters go. I'm not like hugely into Sherlock Holmes since obviously I've not read very much of it. But I do like Sherlock. Like he's a character type I enjoy. I also a friend of mine has read I think all of the stories now. And one of the things I remember her talking about is that a lot of the adaptations like basically turn him into a robot. And they really play up the fact that like only brain, no feelings. And that's like not at all true in the stories. Like he makes jokes. He does have emotions. So I actually think he's a more well-rounded character than some of the adaptations show. But I did like him. And the choice of the second half to be like plot twist Mormons was an interesting one. I just think it was so far to go for that like reveal at the end. Yes. But like I had fun. Like I like this era of mysteries, I think, more than like I don't read very many mystery thrillers like at all. So this was fun for me. Sherlock is a ridiculous show off, but I just accept that as who he is. I think also like of Sherlock and like Watson, the character types I tend to like more are more like Sherlock. I ended up getting really annoyed with like Martin Freeman in the BBC Sherlock. I'm like, we get it. You're a regular person. Shut up. So I personally didn't mind Sherlock as being like the focus character.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think those are my main thoughts. I don't know if any of that made sense.
It did.
Yeah, no, it definitely did.
Yeah.
I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I had a lot of fun, especially with the first half. Like you two, when the second half started, I was like, okay, so it's like a short little like flashback explanation. And then it kept going and I checked my phone. I was like, did I click on some sort of like John Steinbeck novel?
I know. Did Arthur Conan Doyle have a personal vendetta with a Mormon person? Because, oh my God. Like,
it went on for so long.
Yeah.
Like, and it did tie into like the motivation of the crime committer, I guess.
Yeah.
But we had to know like how this girl met her adoptive father to know that a man fell in love with her and wanted to avenge her. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that was way too long. I do disagree with you, Julia, in that I do like that John Watson is our POV character because like for people like us, you know, the normals, it's going to be hard for us to like follow Sherlock Holmes's like mind and how it zips. So like it's nice to sort of experience that confusion through the eyes of Watson and to always have like that bit that's missing. I don't know. It's kind of fun for me. Watson is kind of a dull man, but it makes it easy for me to put my personality into his.
He's an everyman, yeah.
A little self-insert.
But yeah, it was interesting. Oh, we've got so Chloe here writes 2 out of 5 stars. I also think the part on the murderer's backstory in Mormonism were just too long. It was like reading a totally different book. I agree.
Yeah. Judging by the fact that I actually thought it was a different book the first time I tried to read this. Like,
well, you know what I did like?
Making me feel much better about that. Thank you, everybody.
What I did really like about the whole twist of A Study in Scarlet, though, was like, I feel like I personally don't read a lot of mysteries where they're like, and we caught the murderer and we agree with him. Like, like the murderer was like a sympathetic guy and you understood why he had killed these men. So you were like, okay, he's not the bad guy, but he did kill people. Like, let us not make that mistake.
Right.
But so it's just kind of funny that they had like that little like, oh, but don't worry, you won't get hanged because your heart's giving out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
convenient.
It was very convenient timing.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of what you were saying, Julia,
Huh.
what did you think of the mystery overall, and did the outcome of like who actually was the murderer, did that make sense to you?
I mean, it was long-winded to get there, but I was like, I get it. Yeah. Like it worked for me. I think that's why overall, because like 3 stars for me is not a bad book, you know, like
Mhm.
if it's over that halfway point between, 1 and 5, like there's more good than bad to me. So yeah, like overall the ending worked for me. I did like that.
Yeah. What about you, Cara?
Yeah, I think it came together pretty well too. One thing that was interesting is, well, obviously, like the way that Sherlock arrives at the conclusions and like the little things that he picks up on. Because there were a few times where he would make this like conclusion where I'm like, I mean, maybe, but I don't think that's sure enough to base a whole theory off of it. But for all the things where that happened, there were like at least an equal number of times where I'm like, oh, that's actually really clever. Like that makes sense why you would know it would be a taxi driver because of like all these other things. So yeah, I think the mystery was pretty satisfying. Like we crossed an ocean to get there, but like
Literally.
yeah, but I think it did come together in a pretty satisfying way. And yeah, Julia, I agree. It was a really interesting way to end with like kind of everybody involved was like, oh yeah, I get it. Like I see why you did that. We got to arrest you, but I feel you.
So I think what I was doing while reading this was sort of mixing it up with like the closed room mystery, sort of like an Agatha Christie thing where like the reader is supposed to follow along, and while they might not have all the pieces, they could themselves like deduce who was the murderer. And it took me a while to realize Sherlock Holmes just isn't that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, how is anyone going to go with, oh, Mormons?
Well, it was pretty obvious, Taylor, from that first part of the story. Naturally, we have to go to Utah.
Yeah.
Which, can I also say, like, I'm not an expert on this time period in American history, but it was like the mob. Like,
They were terrifying.
Like, the fact that it was basically like the mafia or the mob that was like running. Like, I know that like the polygamy thing was a problem, and like I know there was like some history there that he was drawing on, but I have to think that the way he wrote everything, the way that like people would just get murdered, like, and no one would ever hear from them again. I'm like, I have questions. I don't think that's how that would go, but I don't know enough to be like definitive.
Yeah,
it was an interesting choice. Like he clearly had some issues with Mormons.
So actually, that does bring me to my next question, which I just wrote as, "Hey, what about that Mormonism chapter?" So I do want to know, wanted to say, God, I can't speak today. I did want to say that I did read up on the Mormonism chapter, and according to Wikipedia, which is never right and always correct, apparently Arthur Conan Doyle did apologize to like the grandson of Brigham Young before he died, privately, something like that. Hold on, I should have had it pulled up. But like, I guess he wrote it as he would have understood Mormonism, which so
not the best.
My understanding of Mormonism is how it was back in the 1800s is very different from how it is now, but I also don't think it functioned like a mob.
Exactly. That is exactly what I was getting at. Thank you for summing that up so beautifully.
Okay, yeah. It says here, years after Conan Doyle's death, Levi Edgar Young, a descendant of Brigham Young and a Mormon general authority, claimed that Conan Doyle had privately apologized, saying that Conan Doyle said that he had been misled by writings of the time about the church and had written a scurrilous book about the Mormons.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't know what you thought of that. We can talk about the chapter as a whole, as well as its depictions of Mormonism. And I mean, I think it's a given that there was a lot of anti-Indigenous sentiment there. The minute we went to America, I was like, okay, I I know what we're in
Here
for.
comes the racism.
It's about to get messy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you had any other thoughts about that chapter. It could be about the Mormonism or not. I really do like that you did compare it to like the mob, like, and how it was depicted.
Truly.
Yeah.
Also, Brigham Young showing up, like, I was like, okay, Mormons, and then all of a sudden Brigham Young's here.
It's like Arthur Conan Doyle knew about like 2 Mormon people, like, so he had to put them both in, like or I guess even one. Yeah, I think pretty much my thoughts are like what we've been talking about, where it definitely was not a very sympathetic portrayal. I mean, the fact that the most sympathetic, or actually most, like, the sympathetic characters that we got from that section were all ones that were like not really into, like, they were not really practicing Mormonism. I think that is also kind of telling. I do like that he apparently apologized later in his life, and it does make sense that, like, you kind of get the feeling from the way he wrote the story that it's like, you've never actually met a Mormon person, have you? You know, like, he was just going off of writings from people who already didn't like them. So I think that all kind of makes sense with where that story went.
Yeah.
Those are kind of, I guess that's my point.
I was thinking though, I forgot the woman's name, but the young girl, when they were like, well, she's holding out, we don't have enough women here to get married, like, for men. So she can marry the man with 4 husbands or the man with 7 husbands. And I'm like, well, the man with 7 husbands or not 7 husbands, 7 wives is the one hoarding all the women.
Yeah.
I think there's an easy fix to this.
I've got a solution for you.
Yeah. Also, one thing I did want to say, that, like, when, I think, Julia, you said her name was Lucy?
Yeah.
Okay. When
I
Lucy
wrote about it in my review because I was like, oh, a girl, let me care about her.
Yeah. When Lucy met the guy who would, like, avenge her death, which was very sad, by the way. She, like, wasted away.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, and her adoptive father was murdered. That's always nice. But, like, one thing that I did think was interesting is when Lucy met the guy who, like, she would fall in love with, he gave off some, like, pretty big red flags. I was like, is this the bad guy? And then it's like, oh no, he's the good guy who's trying to rescue her from the bad guy. I guess you're better than the others. But, like, I don't know. I just thought the way they were introduced, because he was so intense about her so fast.
He
And I'm like,
really
oh
strong.
yeah.
Like,
And he was like, he met her once and he was like, I will have that woman or I will die. And I'm like, are you the murderer? Like, I mean, what? But not for the reasons we thought.
Yeah, so true.
yeah. But at least we got one woman.
I know. I
A
was
singular
so
woman,
excited.
yeah.
Yay.
You get one woman per story.
lady. Let me pin all my hopes and dreams on you, Lucy.
Yeah.
And then she died.
So we're gonna move on to Scandal in Bohemia, and then we're gonna get more in depth with the characters.
Ooh,
So
cool.
for Scandal in Bohemia, what are your thoughts / ratings?
I gave it 4.5 stars. I liked it so much more. And maybe that has to do with the fact that it was a short story, so we didn't have the weird pacing issue. Maybe it had to do with the fact that Irene Adler is an icon. We're gonna fangirl in a minute, I'm sure. I'm obsessed with her. I can't believe this was my Goodreads review. I can't believe someone would come up with the character that is Irene Adler and then go, but let me write more about this Sherlock guy. Like, I would have ditched Sherlock and made her my new star of all my books. She's so fascinating to me. And she didn't do anything wrong. She's perfect. Okay, the end. That's my review, 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one too. I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I love Irene Adler also, out of all proportion to how many pages she's in. I just love that woman. I also think she did nothing wrong. I will say I expected her outsmarting Sherlock to be, like, more impressive than it was. Yeah. Basically what she did was, like, she was like, hey, I wonder if that's Sherlock. And then she followed him and was like, that is in fact Sherlock. And then she just left.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, like, I guess kind of makes sense because Sherlock is, like, so overconfident and cocky that, like, he would never think that somebody else would think of disguising themselves. Like, as soon as that, like, young page boy walked by, I'm like, that's Irene. So yeah, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. I have like this has reignited my rage with how dirty the BBC Sherlock did her.
Mm-hmm.
I have some thoughts about that, but yeah, I had a great time with this one. I can't believe how short it was, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, can I say one more thing too?
Yes.
I think the weirdest thing about it though was the way the beginning of the story, and it's like, I get that these aren't like the 2 consecutive ones, but you know, there's more in between that we didn't read. But it's like so weird to me that Watson starts the story and he's like, you know, we've been up to just boy things. I got married. Sherlock has been busy with his addiction. And I was like, whoa, what? Like, that was a lot just to throw in casually. Like, I knew relatively just from pop culture, but I was like, okay, you can't just drop that on us. Jeez. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Nana writes, did you get any A-Spec vibes from Sherlock in the beginning of the story? And
I was going to ask you, Nana.
Yeah, I've heard of people like trying to interpret how Sherlock Holmes is like, you know, how his like mind works. So I think that is a really interesting like reading of it.
I think what pisses me off is that the adaptations can never stick to one answer.
Yeah.
That really really bothers me.
Yeah,
one of the many
the
things
BBC one.
I was going to say, one of the many things that the BBC Sherlock did to make me break up with it, which always happens with BBC shows, is I love their first season so much, and then they make choices that just make me really sad and disappointed. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, I also really like this short story. I'm stuck between a 3.5 and a 4-star rating. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Irene Adler. I liked, because I feel like you also don't see a lot of Sherlock Holmes's goofy mystery solving side. You also don't see him laughing a lot, which he did in this short story, and it was quite charming.
Yeah.
But
he officiated or he was a witness for their wedding.
Yeah.
He walks in and he's like, Watson, you'll never believe what just happened.
It was so farcical. I loved that.
I know. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Taylor. You just reminded me of that part.
Like, I can just imagine like this being a sitcom, and he's like, what? I also like the idea that Sherlock Holmes thinks his like disguises are amazing and they're really, really bad. Yeah. So Irene Adler is like, what is this man with a ferret on his face like doing?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the whole like reason they get the case, I think, is wild. Like, the king of Bohemia is like, hey, so I had an affair and my new wife is kind of a stickler about that, so could you just like make it go away? And then at the end they tell him like, hey, she got away, and he's like, it's okay, she promised not to use the blackmail. And I'm like, what? He's like, she's totally trustworthy. And I'm like, she was just blackmailing you like 2 pages ago. What are you doing? Yeah.
So what did you think of the mystery overall, and what did you think of the outcome?
I mean, I kind of started talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
I also excuse me, I also really loved the letter that Irene left. Yeah. She's like, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Thanks, babe. Like,
and then she left her picture behind.
Yeah.
But he kept it. Sherlock kept it. Yeah, I enjoyed the mystery. Like I said before, I was kind of expecting a bigger outsmarting thing. Yeah. But I also kind of like the idea that you didn't actually have to be that fancy. Like, if Sherlock underestimates you, it's a lot easier to get around him than you'd think. I thought it was really, really clever the way that Sherlock found out where the safe was. Yeah. Because that makes sense. It's like, yeah, people would go towards what they wanted to protect, which they did in the BBC Sherlock. And I remember thinking that was really smart. And it's like, oh, it turns out the good stuff you did was already there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I remember being so confused when he was like, hey, just throw this and yell fire. I was like, why would he do that? And then in the moment that's happening, I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Like, it was really good.
Yeah. And I did like that Sherlock Holmes and Watson are both sort of like disgusted with the king when he's like, oh, she would have made a great wife if she wasn't like so slutty or something.
Yeah, it's like, if she was on my level, like,
yeah,
what level is that?
Yeah.
He would never sink that low, actually.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too, the way he was talking about like the princess he was going to marry, as like he didn't say anything like outright rude about her, but the implication was kind of like, she's a little uptight. She doesn't like it when I sleep around. And it's like, that seems pretty basic. Like,
women, am I right?
women.
So for the photo of Irene Adler, so in my head I was imagining like they were nudes or something, but then I was like, wait a minute, the cameras back then were huge. There was so much setup. How could that happen?
Oh my god.
But they must have been compromising or something, because him just having a picture of a woman.
Well, you mean the one that they were trying to get back?
Yeah.
Wasn't it them together?
I think it was just them together, and that was enough to be like, oh, he was involved with a lowly opera singer.
I did kind of have the same thought, though, Taylor. Not like fully like, oh, they're nudes, but I was like, what kind of photo could be so scandalous, And then I was like, oh, it's just like proof that they knew each other.
Just like being near her was enough to besmirch his reputation.
Okay. So. I was like, how did they even take nudes back then?
It was a lot of work, I imagine.
They just like mailed them and they're like, hello, my lady. Are you awake?
You had a messenger go to like drop off the photos.
Oh my gosh.
So let's move on to characters. So I kind of just, not some guidelines, but some things we might want to consider is when talking about these characters, like, how did you think of them before you read the books? And how do you think of them now that you've actually read 2 Sherlock Holmes stories? And are they different from how they are implemented in the... I loved using cultural zeitgeist.
As soon as you said that word, I'm like, nice.
Yeah, good one.
Nice.
Big brain.
I mean, listen, I love it too. I truly will tell my friends, like in conversation, they'll say something and I'll be like, good word. Like, I just love a good word sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes it
good
just
word,
hits.
Taylor.
So Sherlock Holmes. Let's start with our boy.
Okay, well, I mean, I already established my stance on Sherlock. I will say, I think in reading the books, he was a lot more personable than I expected him to be, and I was very pleasantly surprised by that. So it was nice to see, like, the silly little things that he does, like the disguises, which I was going to say this earlier. There's like a part in Les Mis where it says specifically how like Jean Valjean, like when he was on the run, he had like wigs and like random things in his like coat pockets to like have on the ready to be in disguise from Javert. So I'm picturing Sherlock Holmes with like his classic trench coat, but then he's like, and, like pretending to be someone else, which is a great mental image. However, as someone who is like mentally scarred by every boy in a class in high school who just thought he was God's gift to academia, like just the biggest know-it-all in the world, like that energy. I'm sorry, because I was a know-it-all kid too. I just hated when boys did it, okay? So I can't unhear that part of him where he's like, well, I noticed this and this, and you might have seen this, but did you know it means that? And I'm like, you should have said something, buddy. Like you let us know when you see it every single time, please, instead of like waiting for this big like, and here's how I knew it all. And also I surmised this. And did you know that if I eat this pill, it's not the poison one? And I'm like, what? So I get a little irritated by him, by the intellectual energy, but he can't help it. He's very smart. I get it. But to me, this is the end of my rant, I swear. To me, as the iconic world's greatest detective, like I want to see the detecting. I just don't want to be told, like, I knew it. I don't know. I like to be spoon-fed little clues along the way, okay? I want to be the world's greatest detective too. And Sherlock does not give me that chance, I feel like.
Yeah. I definitely get that. Sherlock Holmes is definitely actually a woman before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, all of your points are fair. I think like a lot of the reason that he doesn't bug me is because I'm like comparing him to other characters or other things. Like I like the reveal, like the way he does his reveals. I like that more than like something that sometimes TV shows do where like they have all the suspects in a room and he's like, and that's why you murdered him and blah blah blah, but it wasn't you, it was you, and then they like do the whole thing again and they're like, but it wasn't you, that's what you wanted us to think, it was actually you. Like that is what gets on my nerves so much. So this, by comparison, I'm like, okay, fine. Like I don't mind not being able to follow, because I think what frustrates me, one of the reasons I don't read a lot of mystery thrillers, is like they pretend you're supposed to be able to follow along, but then it's like not reasonable to assume that. So like I don't mind when you're not intended to, I guess. But as
So
far as like sorry, go ahead.
You would rather like have the grand reveal than be intentionally misled.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know that not all mysteries do intentionally mislead you, but I feel like quite a few of them do.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of feel like this is also one of the reasons I don't read a lot of them, is I don't want to be shocked because the ending makes no sense. Like I would rather see something coming and feel like it's believable than be like, well, of course that's a twist, because where did that come from? Although like the Utah thing is an arguable counter argument to that. But yeah, as far as like Sherlock as a character, I kind of talked about this already, but I really like how he is much more personable in the stories. I think it's interesting that basically every adaptation I've ever seen has really played up the like non-emotional thing, which I don't know. I would be interested what you guys think. I don't get the feeling from the stories that he does have fewer emotions than other people. He's just like so intensely focused on what he's working on that when he's in the zone, he's like not going to stop and have an emotional response to it. You know what I mean? Like but like when he's talking to people he cares about, he has emotions. Like he laughs, he makes jokes. The part when he comes in, he's like, LOL, Watson, guess what? Like he doesn't actually read that differently to me from like other characters that would be doing what he's doing in terms of like personality. And I think another reason that the mansplaining thing doesn't get to me more is because he does it to like literally everybody. Like that's just like he's just a show off. And another reason it didn't bug me as much is because in the second story we read, he gets his comeuppance and he's like, oh, okay.
And that's why I love Irene.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that surprised me most about book Sherlock Holmes, is that he, like you said, Cara, he does have emotions, and like he can be a bit of a know-it-all and show off, but he also like has fun and is funny, and he's never like actively mean, like or like intentionally mean. Whereas when I think of like the BBC Sherlock, when he's always just talking down to Watson, and like a lot of other Sherlock Holmes adaptations, I feel, do this. Like, what? You didn't know this? As opposed to him like explaining it. I thought that was like, I don't know, really interesting. And I hate how a lot of adaptations have done that. Like, just make him like friendly, serious when it's time to work, but also like, you know, he's quirky, like playing his violin at like 2 a.m. because he needs to think. Or what is it? Not knowing that the earth like revolves around the sun, and
he's like, that's like, useless information to me.
I'm just going to forget it. Which is like a kind of a fun quirk too.
Yeah. And I think also by like the adaptations making him like I swear some of them that do this the most, it's like, did you misunderstand and think he's an android? Like what is going on? Like I think that also can play into, for one thing, if they are reading him as a spec, that's not great. But then also just like this general dichotomy of like, oh, if you're smart, it means you don't have emotions, or like you're not like emotional in the same way, or that like you don't care about people. And I just think that's weird. Like it's interesting that the original stories from like the 1800s were like, oh no, of course he has feelings. He's smart, but he's a person. Versus like all these modern adaptations that are like, so as you know, smart people are robots. Like,
yeah. One of the things that also gets me is that Sherlock Holmes is always portrayed as like straight and romantically interested in women. But like in the books, it makes it pretty clear that Sherlock Holmes just isn't interested in like romance at all.
yeah.
And it's like, I kind of wish we had more adaptations like that too, that aren't like,
Yeah.
oh, Irene Adler was his one true love, or like, here's
Right.
a hot girl that Sherlock Holmes is definitely into. It's like, well, he's not really interested in like romance. So why do we
Save
have to
that
pair
for
him off?
Phryne Fisher. We got other detectives out there
That's right.
on everyone.
Phryne Fisher. I love it. So we could talk about our everyman, John Watson. You know, what did you think of him? What did you think of him compared to like other versions?
I don't have any impression of other Watsons other than Jamie Watson, who was the worst. So
Everyone in
favorable
that book
opinion.
was the worst.
Favorable opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, because Enola Holmes didn't even have Watson, did it? I don't think he did at all. Maybe an Enola Holmes too? Anybody? Come on, I'm so excited. Okay, anyways. I'm just gonna keep bringing it back to Enola. Yeah, I liked him. I liked the one discussion that he had with Sherlock where it was like the contrast between the two of I think it was in A Scandal in Bohemia. I could be wrong, where Sherlock is like, well, yeah, you saw all the same things I saw, but you didn't like perceive them and like actually observe them. Like you saw that you went upstairs, but did you know there were 17 stairs? Like I counted them. Like those little things where I was like, that's a good like distinction to describe kind of the contrast between them. I like that.
Yeah. And it adds a bit of an explanation to how like, you know, anyone could be a Sherlock Holmes. It's just you have to like hyper focus on things.
It's like what's that show called? Psych.
I was thinking about that. I love Psych.
I love it too, that you can like train yourself to notice that kind of detail. Yeah. I also I liked John Watson in these stories. From what I've heard in some of the older adaptations, like movie adaptations, they kind of make him like a bumbling idiot who like just keeps smacking into walls and then eventually finds a clue for Sherlock. That's like the impression I got. But like as compared to other adaptations, I liked him more than Martin Freeman. I'm sure Martin Freeman's a lovely person. I think it was also that he was getting cast as like Mr. Regular Man in like every single thing, so I got tired of him. But it was not his fault. But I like Book Watson more than him. But yeah, like I think he provides some nice contrast to Sherlock. I think that some of the adaptations I've seen, I have more fun with those Watson characters. But like, I liked him. he was nice.
General positive opinion.
Exactly.
Nana says, I count stairs all the time, so I felt like that was quite autistic of him, and that a lot of people do see Sherlock Holmes as autistic. So that meaning that, you know, he's like emotionless isn't a good
right
thing.
Yeah. I was thinking about the autism discussion that people have been having for a while, when they were talking about like when Watson was describing his like complete like intense interest or complete non-interest in things, and they're describing how into like chemistry he is and like all of this stuff, and it's like this kind of sounds like a special interest, like, you know what I mean? So which I think is just like a great example. I'm not saying that Sherlock was intended to be, because I definitely don't think they had that that term back then, but it's like kind of a good example of like there were people who were like this before we had a word for them, you know? So
yeah. And I think it would be interesting to explore that in a Sherlock Holmes adaptation where he's not a like emotionless person.
Yes.
Where he like is like funny and gets roped into officiating a wedding to someone he's stalking. Like, but obviously we haven't had anyone who as of yet is, I think, capable of doing a big budget adaptation of that and doing it accurately and respectfully.
Yeah.
As for like John Watson, I do like reading from his point of view, and I do like how chill he is with everything. He's just like, yeah, I guess I'm going along with my roommate that I met a week ago.
That part where Sherlock is like, hey, can I ask you to do something? And he's like, sure. He's like, it's illegal. And he's like, that's okay. And he's like, is it gonna I think Watson does ask, like, is it gonna hurt anyone? And Holmes is like, oh, absolutely not. He's like, cool, when do we start? Like, he's like totally down to break the law at like the drop of a hat.
Yeah, he's a ride or die friend for sure.
He is, and he is very chill, and I think that's like a nice contrast to Sherlock.
Ooh.
And I also love that like in A Study in Scarlet, he's known Sherlock Holmes for like a week, and he's already like solving murder mysteries with him.
Yeah,
it's like, really, John Watson, do you not have anything else to do?
He does not.
No. Free as a bird. Highlight Mary Margaret's comment because I love this.
Yeah.
Yes. He has emotions, he just isn't emotive as often, which I think is very interesting and a good like way of describing Holmes. And we've already talked about Irene Adler, but she was the final character on our character list. So if anyone has anything else they want to say about her,
she's perfect.
I love her.
Yeah.
Whatever I tweeted where I was like, oh, I'm so excited to talk about Irene Adler was so tame. Originally, I had typed out, Irene Adler is my sun, moon, and stars. And I was like, calm down, save it for the live show. And drafted a new tweet. But I'm obsessed with her personally. And I still have not had anyone tell me like, oh yeah, here's a book series as a retelling about Irene. And I'm like, where is it? I know it has to exist. I refuse to believe there isn't a Sherlock retelling centered on Irene Adler. And if so, I guess I have to write it. Like, is this on me? There has to be one.
You have to.
I love her so much. She's so smart, and I also like that her nefarious deeds, it's like they were well deserved. Like, and she wasn't really doing anything wrong. It's like the king was like kind of an asshole to her, and he was an idiot to get involved with her. And it's like, listen, she doesn't have a lot of ways of making money, and if you're gonna be a jerk to her, she's gonna make you pay her for it.
I googled and I found it. There's a series. It's from the 1990s. I'm gonna read them.
Please let me know how they
What's
are.
the series called?
They're just called Irene Adler books. But the first one is called Goodnight, Mr. Holmes.
Ooh. I like, in my head, when like she left behind the photo of herself and the letter, it's just Irene Adler in like a power suit with super large shoulder pads, and it's just, you hate to see a girl boss winning.
We can't have a live show without a girl boss showing up. I love it.
And I actually like this one.
Yeah.
As opposed to Milady. I did like Rebecca, though. That was our other one.
But those two were Gaslight Gatekeep girl bosses.
Right. She's just this is a regular wholesome garden variety. Like, I just really love her.
The series might be romantic though with Sherlock, which is kind of a bummer because I don't want that, but I'll still read it.
Yes.
Chloe, unfortunately, this is the one and only canonical piece of Sherlock Holmes.
That's
where
the first thing I googled. I was like, tell me. She's like mentioned in a couple, but that's it.
She's just, I love her.
I know.
And I mentioned this earlier, but it's made me angry all over again about, I guess, warning for spoilers for the second season of BBC Sherlock. So if nobody wants to hear those, but have you guys seen that one?
I've like heard of what they did to Irene Adler.
I refuse to touch anything that has Benedict Cumberbatch in it. So
this, like, it is so bad. The like, and it was annoying at the time, but I'm like even more annoyed in retrospect because of like the way she's actually written about. But like, her big thing is that like she walks in and she's naked, and like just it like short circuits Sherlock's brain, of course. And also the combination to her safe where she was hiding the thing, I don't even remember if they changed what it was in there, probably, was her measurements, because she had the perfect measurements of like an hourglass shape, and it's such bullshit. And then it gets worse at the end because she's about to get like executed by somebody, and like Sherlock swoops in and saves her, and like that's where the credits end. And I'm like, I hate this so much. Like, I'm laughing, but I'm so angry. This is like angry laughing.
The thing about making her combination, her measurements, like,
I
am so deeply offended.
I would have rather you said like it was 666 because she's an evil woman. Like that would have been less disappointing to me. Her measurements.
I also heard like in the Sherlock show she was like a lesbian, which I do like for like an adaptation of Irene Adler, but I also heard they don't really follow through.
I don't remember if I've seen that part of Elementary. You said Elementary is the one?
Oh, no, sorry, Sherlock.
Oh.
But in Elementary, it's Natalie Dormer, right?
Yes.
I love Natalie Dormer.
Yes, I love her too. I haven't seen the Irene Adler episodes. I think I skipped them because I was like, I know what they're going to do with her.
Yeah.
I don't actually know if they like messed with her, but I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to watch it though, because listen, the way she fought the writers at the Tudors for her Anne Boleyn stuff, like I have some faith in Natalie Dormer. Like they so badly wanted her to be blonde, and she's like, I will not dye my hair blonde to be Anne Boleyn. I will be brunette.
Nice.
I just love her.
Taylor, were you going to say something earlier? I think I may have cut you off.
Not that I remember. I think hearing about Irene Adler's measurements like short-circuited my brain. I don't think I can have any more new information because that just
I'm furious.
So stupid.
Just girl things. So those were like the main questions I had. I don't know if anyone wants to discuss anything else. I do have a quote section, but I do feel like the way these books are written, they aren't particularly quotable.
I had like 2 from the Irene Adler
story. I had 2 from the Irene Adler.
One of them, I just put in my Goodreads review. I loved it so much. It's like how the story ends. And that was how a great scandal threatened to affect the kingdom of Bohemia, and how the best plans of Mr. Sherlock Holmes were beaten by a woman's wit. He used to make merry over the cleverness of women, but I have not heard him do it of late.
I love it so much.
Yeah, and then like the very last sentence is, and when he speaks of Irene Adler, or when he refers to her photograph, it is always under the honorable title of the woman. Yeah. So that was one of them.
That was
I agree.
The ones I had marked. She is the woman. So I just have the quote from when the king of Bohemia is like, what a woman, oh, what a woman, cried the king of Bohemia when we had all 3 read this epistle. Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? It is not a pity that she was not on my level. From what I have seen of the lady, she seems to be on a very different level to your majesty, said Holmes coldly.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. I did not save any quotes, but those are also my favorite parts. So
yeah.
I love too the way, and I thought I took a picture of this, and apparently I didn't. But the way that the story starts is introducing her as like to Sherlock Holmes. She is always the woman, as if she is the only representative of, and it just goes off like that. And I think that's a very strong way to open that story.
Yeah. And it's strong in that you open it and close it with referring to Irene Adler as the woman.
Yeah.
Yes. I took a picture of another page and I'm trying to figure out why. One I did mark that I thought was interesting. So like Sherlock is talking about how the bumbling policemen always get credit even when he like hands them the solution. Mm-hmm. And he says, what you do in this world is a matter of no consequence, returned my companion bitterly. The question is, what can you make people believe that you have done? And I'm like, ooh. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Powerful.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I like is that Sherlock Holmes does show up the cops, but he also isn't like super invested in getting like credit in the press for it. I do kind of like that, because I also feel like he can be a bit of an egomaniac in adaptations, as opposed
Yeah.
to like he is a bit of an egomaniac in the books, but not to the extent that he usually is.
Yeah. And I get the feeling, and I don't know if this is like said in the text or if I'm just inferring this, but it talks about his like all of these like passions and interests and how good he is at all of these things that make him a good investigator. And you do kind of get the feeling that like he had made the decision to use these things for a good purpose, you know, because like he could have been like a, I don't know, like a chemist or some kind of like professor or something. Like he could have done other things with it, but he's like, hey, I have all these interests and abilities, I'm gonna catch bad guys with them.
Exactly, which I do like about him.
Yeah.
You know what I would like to see more of? Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes.
Exactly, bestie. It's in post-production. We're supposed to get it this year.
I've already seen him in The Witcher, and I'm like, this season was good, but I need more. So yeah, unless you two have anything else to say, we can pass it on over to Cara, who will tell us about our next read.
Yes. I should have grabbed it to talk about it, but I don't think I did. Oh, wait, I can grab it. See how prepared I am, you guys.
You're doing amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next read, this is one of the only times where the person hosting has read it before. We don't do that often, but we did it this time because we're going to be reading Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde. This is a collection, which is why it says The Importance of Being Earnest in Other Plays. This is one of my favorite things, so I'm not going to be very good at like a measured discussion of its flaws and faults. It's like, I love this play so much, and I hope other people love it. Oscar Wilde is in my channel name, so I'm kind of a fan.
True.
But like, as far as what it's about, it is, I guess that would be considered a comedy of manners, although one of the reasons I love it, like this is my favorite thing that I've read from Oscar Wilde so far. And one of the reasons is that it is very funny, but there's a lot of like emotion underneath it. And I think it deals with some really interesting things about women's place in society at this time. I also want to mention, in case people are like new to his plays, is there's a couple of his comedies where like the first scene is just like, wow, there's like 14 characters. Who are all of you? So if you're like worried about that, it gets a lot easier to follow. So I don't want anyone getting like concerned, because that concerned me the first time I read it. I was like, who is everyone? But yeah, it's a really good play, and because it is a play, it's going to be a short one, so we'd love to have you join us. Yeah, I'm really excited.
And I'm really excited because this is, correct me if I'm wrong, well, other than the two Sherlock Holmes stories, this is our first time repeating an author, right?
Yeah.
So let's hopefully redeem ourselves from Picture of Dorian Gray. Like,
hey, you're the only one who didn't love that. Well, we loved it, I should say. Not love, but enjoyed.
Yeah. So okay. So then let's improve on that. Yeah. Any like questions or comments about it?
No, other than it'll probably be during the end of February. That's usually when we have our live shows. I know we do put up notification like the day before.
Sometimes.
I apologize for that. But if you're ever wondering when our next live show is, it's probably the last weekend of the month.
Yeah,
Usually.
it's like usually the Sunday closest to the end of the month. Sometimes that'll be the beginning of the next month, but
Most
I'm looking at
the 27th.
Yeah, I was gonna say it almost certainly will be February 27th, and it is a play, so it's nice and short. Yeah. I kind of want to start it now, even though I have other things I need to read.
Well,
oh, good. Mary Margaret loves that one.
Yay! Yay! I'm so excited. But yeah, unless anyone has anything else to say, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into our live show. I had a lot of fun talking about Sherlock Holmes and Jane Austen.
Because we can make any live show about Jane Austen. It's one of our great events.
Absolutely.
Third tagline, we can make this about Jane Austen.
Just watch me, yeah.
I've got like my conspiracy theory corkboard, and I'm like, how can I make this about Jane Austen?
I love it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Cara and Julia.
Thank you for
good
hosting.
night, everyone.
Yes, thank you for leading us.